In this video, we're going to talk briefly about what ADHD is, as well as some tips for how to manage ADHD. But first, my name is Keegan. I have a master's degree in counseling. I make videos like this to help you better understand counseling, psychology, and mental health. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD, is a common condition that can create many different problems in people's lives. As the name suggests, people with ADHD can struggle with maintaining their attention or focus on many different things in life. For each person with ADHD, this might look a little different, but in general, they may struggle with things like having their mind wander, they may struggle with getting distracted when they're in the middle of the task and then not actually completing it, or they may have trouble focusing on a conversation. For people who struggle primarily with the attention piece of ADHD, this is what we'd call the inattentive type of ADHD. A second aspect of ADHD then is hyperactivity. In this case, the person can often feel driven to move. It may seem as though they have an endless amount of energy and are bouncing off the walls. Or it could be that they're just fidgeting a lot, or they have to tap their finger or their leg, or they're really talkative. If someone has ADHD that manifests mainly in the hyperactivity, this would be called the hyperactive or impulsive type of ADHD. For some people with ADHD, this will show up primarily in a way that they struggle to keep their focus or attention on something. Others will see it with struggles related to hyperactivity. And yet others will struggle with both the hyperactive and the inattentive pieces of ADHD. When someone struggles with the hyperactivity and the attention piece, this is called the combined type of ADHD. But no matter what form of ADHD somebody has, it can create a lot of different struggles throughout their life. I've been reading Driven to Distraction. This book covers ADHD, or what was called Attention Deficit Disorder, or ADD at that time. And it goes into great detail helping the reader understand what it can be like for somebody who has ADHD. People of various ages can struggle with ADHD, and each person's struggles can look unique. And so they go through in the book helping you understand different situations and how that person's ADHD was showing up. Not only that, but they give great knowledge about what ADHD is and various ways to understand it compared to how people might think about it and a more accurate way of understanding the condition. ADHD is something that does not go away, and it's something that is usually going to be diagnosed in childhood because that's where it often will show up. But we're seeing more and more cases where the person made it through childhood and their ADHD was not noticed or just maybe not treated. And so it's not uncommon for an adult to find out later in life that they have ADHD, and this can be a huge weight lifted off of them as they begin to better understand why they were experiencing some of the things that they did throughout life. Now that I briefly talked about what ADHD is, let's talk about some of the tips that we have for ADHD. First, and I'll say this might seem obvious, but make sure that you actually have ADHD. There are many other mental health conditions that can show up or appear very similar to how ADHD does. So while in some cases your mental health professional may be able to diagnose ADHD just by talking to you and seeing what things have been like or seeing how you are in the session, most often that won't be the case. Instead, they may also have to talk to other people in your life, or more common still, they're going to more likely have you do different questionnaires or assessments that can help piece apart if you have ADHD or another mental health condition. The second tip is to embrace your need for high stimulus activities, but do so safely. For people with ADHD, they will often be drawn to high intensity or high stimulus activities. In some cases, the person might just be seen as a risk taker or a thrill seeker. So if you're one of the people with ADHD who does need these high intensity or high stimulus things in life, recognize that this is just a part of who you are. It's important then to find things that will safely allow you to get your need for that intensity or that stimulation that you're looking for. For somebody who does seek this high stimulation, if they try to ignore that or go too long without seeking the stimulation, they may get into a spot where they impulsively seek this. And that won't allow them to then adequately judge what the safety level or what the risks are of the thing they're about to do. So instead, planning ahead and planning these things out some can be a way to satisfy the urge for that intensity, but also do so in a safer way. Third, add structure to your life. For people with ADHD, their memory and attention can work in a way that will easily result in them forgetting things. It's also common for people with ADHD to frequently lose things or to easily get distracted in the middle of something. So by adding structure into their life in various ways, this can help combat some of the difficulties that ADHD can create. Ways of adding structure into your life might be as simple as having one spot where you put your wallet or other important things when you get home so that you know exactly where they are and you don't lose them. It might also involve something like using a planner so that you're remembering what you need to do from day to day and week to week and month to month. Other ways of adding structure including setting reminders on your phone to help you remember to do things like go to an appointment, or to help you remember to take your medication when needed. A simple way that we can look at this is that for somebody with ADHD, it can be helpful to not rely on their brain or their memory to have to do things or remember things at specific times, but instead kind of outsource those things to technology, planners, or things like that, maybe a routine. And by doing that, it can take some of that work off of their brain to have to remember those things and can just put it into a structure that is outside of them, and they'll just be alerted or into the routine of something, and that can be a very helpful structure or system of how to do things. The fourth tip is directed at procrastination. For many people with ADHD, although they may struggle to maintain focus and attention throughout day-to-day life, when it comes to crunch time, because they procrastinated on something, they can have surprisingly good laser focus. Because this is often how ADHD works, that when a deadline is approaching and someone really needs to get stuff done, that their brain can then engage into a hyper-focused state, they'll often procrastinate because they find they work better under that pressure. But it's not great to leave things to the last minute and to procrastinate, because that just adds a lot of extra stress and pressure into life, not to mention that it can be easy to forget something and then not do it at all. Therefore, rather than procrastinating, it can be better to prioritize. For people with ADHD, creating a list of what needs to be done and doing that list in a strategic way can be very helpful. Then from there, they can take the first thing on the list and break that down into a sub list or different steps. So the approach is then to pick the highest priority thing, do step 1, then step 2, and then step 3. Although this might seem simple and obvious in some ways, for people with ADHD, this approach can then help them to figure out a different and maybe more efficient and better, less stressful way of going about things rather than procrastinating. Fifth is exercise. As we've talked about, people with ADHD can crave high intensity activity. As a result, for a lot of people with ADHD, high intensity exercise can be very helpful for them. Adding exercise, especially if it's vigorous exercise, can be a way to calm both their body and mind in a way that can last well beyond after they're done exercising. Sixth is about when we have a drop in our mood. When we talk about this for people with ADHD specifically, they can often find that they have a goal or something that they're working toward, and once they achieve it, they can actually be hit with a wave of depression afterwards. While it might seem that they should be excited that they achieved their goal, for people with ADHD, the challenge and the journey of getting to their goal is actually something that's very stimulating for their brain. And so then once that's achieved and they don't have that anymore, it can result in a drop in their mood. In Driven to Distraction, they recommend that people with ADHD then expect that drop in their mood after they achieve something they've been wanting. By expecting this wave of depression or drop in their mood, the people with ADHD are not quite as caught off guard by it and just kind of expect it to be the case so that they can just kind of notice it and hopefully move on. We're getting to the last tip of this video, and then I have a bit of information about ADHD that most people don't realize but can be very helpful to know. But before we get to those, if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please help me out by giving it a like and subscribing. Finally, the seventh tip is education. Educate yourself about what ADHD is, the various forms it can come in, how you can manage it, and ways to cope with it. Also, encourage those in your life to educate themselves also. The more that you learn about ADHD, the better that you can understand it. The better that you can understand it, the better that you can then navigate your life with ADHD. So speaking of education, I'd highly recommend the book Driven to Distraction. This is where these 7 tips came from, and actually there are just many more throughout the book that would be very helpful. These ones came from a list of 50 that is in there. Something else that I learned from this book that I wanted to share is a little bit more about ADHD in general. Most people don't realize that when somebody has ADHD, they often struggle with their self-esteem also. There are many reasons for this about how ADHD can affect somebody's self-esteem. One of the big ones being, though, that throughout that person's life, they're often getting messages of if you just pay attention more, if you try to focus harder, if you just really put your mind to it, you'll be able to do these things. But that's not the case for people with ADHD. Their brain just cannot do that. They cannot try harder to focus, and they cannot work harder to keep their attention on something. So if you're somebody with ADHD, recognize that you haven't done anything wrong. It's not that you haven't worked hard enough. In fact, you should give yourself a pat on the back for how hard you've worked up to this point, trying to overcome the difficulties that ADHD can create in your life. If you know somebody with ADHD, but you maybe don't have it yourself, know that their self-esteem has probably struggled because of their ADHD, and that they could probably use some encouragement and some kind words. These are something that they maybe haven't always gotten, and probably don't even get from themselves. So those are 7 tips for ADHD, as well as some information about the condition itself. I hope that you found this information helpful. While you're here, make sure that you check out some of the other videos on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.